Congrats to the winner of the free iPad. I'm Frank Anno, CFA's Director of Environment and Science Policy, and welcome to our session on the EU and US approach to sustainability. We have two back-to-back presenters joining us remotely, and we'll ask you to hold questions until our Q&A period at the end of the session. Our first speaker is Lynn Fortin, Agriculture Councillor at the Mission of Canada to the EU. She started her position in 2017 after having worked in various roles at AFC for 15 years. She is joining us from Brussels and will be providing a Canadian perspective on the EU's approach to sustainability. Lynn, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes.
If you don't mind, could Gizem go first, just because I think the EU situation is a bit more complicated. So I think it's easier if we do the US first, if you don't mind.
Sounds good. Go right ahead.
Who knew the US situation would be easier? And that iPad might be mine. No, I'm just joking. But thank you very much, Frank, and the Canadian Federation of Agriculture for this opportunity to talk about the US agri-environment approach, at least from how I see it here from on the ground from the embassy in Washington, DC. But before I start on that, I just wanted to provide a quick kind of US political context. As you know, US president is supposed to be the most powerful person in the world, supposedly, but he does not have the money to do what he wants. The money purse in the US is with Congress. And right now, the Democrats have razor-sharp majorities in Congress in both the House and the Senate. This really limits the ability of the Biden administration and the Democrats to move probably most of the funding bills that they want to. So in a time where partisanship is at an all-time high, the Biden administration and the Democrats' ability to move these bills has been very, very limited, especially in environment and agri-related bills as well. Take, for example, the Build Back Better, which I'm sure most of you have heard, includes significant funding for agri-environment, many other important issues as well, but it has not passed Congress. What does this mean for the administration? Is that they have to find ways to advance their priorities in agri-environment and other areas within their current executive authority. So they've been trying to do that by repurposing, reorienting current funds and programs, putting a climate lens on current grants and loan programs as well. I will qualify this just a little bit. In US Congress, there is strong support for addressing climate change, mitigation in agriculture, carbon sequestration, etc. overall. But I think the difference in the partisanship comes on how they're going to achieve this and what tools they're going to use. We saw a growing Climate Solutions Act in the Senate, passed the Senate in April, but it stalled in the House. The bill had very limited funding, was aiming to facilitate development of an ag carbon market. It called for a certification program, an advisory council, and various USDA reporting programs, but it did not pass. So what has the administration been able to achieve so far? Biden administration came into power January 21st, 2021. Within days, on the 27th, issued an executive order titled Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad. This provided the overarching climate priorities for the US government and directed climate change mitigation to be part of every agency's agenda. For agriculture, it highlighted the important role it plays in mitigating climate change, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, sequestering carbons, etc. It also directed USDA to undertake consultations and make recommendations for an agriculture and forestry climate strategy. Also, when Biden was introducing this executive order, he spoke about his desire for US farmers to be the first in the world to achieve net zero emissions and find new sources of income in the process. So Vilsack has taken this, he's made it his priority and direction and made climate change mitigation a top priority for USDA. I've seen Vilsack continuously make reference to how Biden has challenged him, USDA, the US Department of Agriculture, and the US ag sector to reduce greenhouse gas emissions connected to agriculture by half by 2030 and be net zero by 2050. He said he sees agriculture, everything from regenerative practices to biofuels to carbon sequestration, as a key part of the solution to climate change. He has noted that he will take a producer-led, voluntary and market incentive-driven approach to climate change mitigation, and that provides new income sources for the industry. He also talks about more, better, and new markets for farmers for climate-smart agricultural products. He has also talked about the 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, and economic, something I have also heard Minister Bibeau talk about. This is going to be very different than what you're going to hear from Lynn on the EU approach, of course, and all of the more regulatory-based approach that the EU has taken. So what has the US done so far, announced so far? There's been a lot of announcements since January 2021, but I wanted to flag three key ones. First one is, as a result of that January executive order I mentioned, USDA put forth a 90-day report card on a climate smart agriculture and forestry strategy. It included 7 elements, but I'll just mention a few of them, again, in line with everything, with the direction from Biden and Vilsack. It is to prepare USDA to quantify, track, and report the benefits of climate smart activities. So measurements, looking at measurements and accounting. Develop a strategy that works for all farmers, ranchers, landowners, community, the equity and diversity element of it. Leverage existing USDA programs to support climate smart strategies, because they don't have any additional funding, of course. Support new and better markets for agriculture and forestry products, and improve research and management practices to mitigate and adapt to climate change. The second announcement I wanted to flag is a recent one from earlier this February. It is the $1 billion in climate smart commodity partnership programs. This is financing for pilot projects for public-private partnerships with entities like sub-federal governments, small businesses, NGOs, industry groups, academics. The aim is to implement climate smart practices on a large scale, ensuring that there's meaningful involvement from small and historically underserved producers, quantify, monitor, and report on climate results, and look at developing new markets and promoting climate smart commodities. Again, all very similar, but the $1 billion is not new funding. As noted, the administration is tapping to the Commodity Credit Corporation funds. You might recall these funds from when Trump used them for following the imposition of ag retaliatory tariffs on US products. So the third one I wanted to flag was the US Agri-Food Supply Chain Assessment Report, which was released last week. One of the priorities is the ecological and climate risks to crops, which looks at implementing a climate adaptation and resiliency plan. So what to expect for the next year, in the coming year? One, the Farm Bill, the US Farm Bill, is up for renewal in 2023, and discussions are already underway in Congress. Rumors are that there will be no new money, but the expectation by the industry is that climate will be a key focus. This also means, again, climate lens focus on existing programs, focusing on regenerative nature of agriculture, etc. But before then, there's the midterm elections in the US in November. And as I mentioned, the razor-sharp majorities in Congress, it is possible that one or both of the chambers could flip. So that would mean a Democratic president with a divided or a Republican majority Congress, this will make it even more difficult for any additional funding, bills to pass, and potentially even the next farm bill in the US. So what does this all mean for Canada? Canada and the US governments right now share common priorities related to climate change mitigation overall, and including in agriculture. February last year, Prime Minister Trudeau and President Biden agreed on a roadmap for renewed Canada-US partnership. This provided a commitment to promote sustainable and inclusive economic recovery and further collaborate on transition to net zero economies. In agriculture, USDA and Agriculture Canada are already collaborating on a science and tech areas, but we're also looking at further collaborating and information exchange with USDA on agri-environment priorities. We're also working with the US on the multilateral front, on AIM-C, the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, Food is Never Waste, and Sustainable Productivity Growth, which tries to promote innovation to achieve these sustainability goals. And you probably would have heard about this as well, because Vilsack, Secretary Vilsack here has been really publicly using this initiative on sustainable productivity growth as an anti-EU, anti-farm to fork initiative as well. So, lastly, finally, I guess I just wanted to flag a great group. If you're following US agri-environment issues, or if you're interested in this, it's the Food and Ag Climate Alliance. It's an impressive, diverse group of key US agriculture. There's Farm Bill, National Farmers Union, bio farmers, processors, dairy, crop groups, state governments, environmental groups like the Environmental Defense Fund, Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited. They've all joined forces and are meet on a regular basis and are putting forward joint policy recommendations for the development of US federal climate legislation. And they're going to be doing this for the next Farm Bill as well. So I think with that, I'll end there. I'll pass it, I think, back to Frank or to Lynn to talk about the EU approach to agri-environment, and I look forward to our discussion. Over to you, Lynn. Thanks.
And I'm terribly sorry, Frank did not get to introduce Gizem, who has many great qualities and much experience in this area. So, but I guess I'll just go ahead. And I'll start by telling you that if you Google Farm to Fork Strategy EU, you will get to some sort of commission, European Commission website, where you will have loads and loads of information from the perspective of the European decision makers on what the Farm to Fork strategy is and what it seeks to achieve. But before I get into my actual points, I'll just read to you a little bit of an excerpt from that website. The Farm to Fork strategy aims to accelerate our transition to a sustainable food system that should, 1, have a neutral or positive environmental impact, 2, mitigate climate change and adapt to its impacts, 3, reverse the loss of biodiversity, 4, ensure food security, nutrition, and public health. I've lost track of my numbers, but the next one is making sure that everyone has access to sufficient, safe, nutritious, sustainable food. Next, preserve affordability of food while generating fair economic returns. Next, fostering competitiveness of the EU supply sector. And finally, promoting fair trade. The strategy sets out both regulatory and non-regulatory initiatives. And with the common agricultural and fisheries policies as key tools to support a just transition. So I just wanted to tell you that's sort of the tone and the ambition, I guess, if you will, of the Farm to Fork strategy. And what I'm going to do with you folks today, and then I want to leave some time for questions if I find that much more interesting than me droning on for a long time. I'm basically going to go through what is a briefing that I would provide to my ambassador here on, sort of the key points of the Farm to Fork strategy and why it matters. I'm just going to start by saying that the Farm to Fork strategy is one element of the European Green Deal, and the European Green Deal is what is the plan that was elaborated by the current European Commission to guide all decision making on all aspects of EU jurisdiction. So that's at EU level. So that these principles, these green principles and that environmental objectives are now central and prioritized in the context of any sort of decision making and or spending in the EU. So on May 20th, 2020, the European Commission published the Farm to Fork strategy, which, as I mentioned, is a roadmap for enhancing the sector's sustainability, including aquaculture, under the EU Green Deal. The plan seeks to ensure food safety and security, promote healthier diets, create new greener business opportunities, and achieve a more resilient food system overall. The more resilient part was actually added during the pandemic crisis, if you will. So at the heart of the Farm to Fork strategy are key aspirational targets to be achieved by 2030, and these might be familiar to some of you: reducing the use of chemical pesticides, the sale of antimicrobials for farm operations and aquaculture by 50%, boosting the development of organic farming area to 25% of total farmland, introducing high diversity landscape features in at least 10% of agricultural areas. So that last one is basically land set aside that's on private land that's not farmed. So besides these quantified targets, there are also many other objectives in the strategy: reducing food waste, improving animal welfare, the promotion of healthy and sustainable food consumption, including through enhanced food labeling and more sustainable packaging solutions. All of this directed from the European Commission, working in collaboration, of course, with EU member states who have to approve anything. that's done at EU level, and also with, in some cases, approval of the European Parliament, who are a set of separate individuals who are directly elected to participate in decision-making in Brussels. So in the context of international trade, the EU has also expressed the hope that the farm to fork will provide their farmers and producers with a global competitive advantage. In concrete terms, this is to be achieved by obtaining commitments from trading partners to raise their standards by seeking a level playing field through obligations in free trade agreements and by influencing international standard setting bodies. So in other words, the EU standards are to become the world standards, and therefore European producers, farmers and producers will be at the head of the curve, if you will, in terms of competitiveness. Finally, the Commission is interested in pursuing green alliances on sustainable food systems in bilateral, regional, and multilateral fora. So seeking partners to go along this path with them. So in the Farm to Fork strategy, the Commission has set up a multi-step process to be implemented over several years, in fact, probably over about a decade. Work has started to convert some of the 27 action items listed in the annex to the strategy into proposals. And as I mentioned, some of these are legislative, some are not. We don't know yet. Some of them have not really been elaborated and conceptually yet. Some proposals, as I said, are proceeding slowly through EU decision-making processes. Others have yet to be released, and implementation will still take a lot of time. Also, many of the elements of the strategy are very contentious. They're very political, and they have strong opposition in some quarters, notably from some domestic industry players and some member states. The new Common Agricultural Policy. So the Common Agricultural Policy that was agreed between the Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council of Europe, which is basically the member states, will take effect in January 2023. And it is a key vehicle through which the Commission is seeking to ensure that F2F targets are met. In essence, farmers and others who receive funding will face enhanced conditionality in terms of receiving any funding linked to the farm to fork objectives. And they will be rewarded in some cases for putting in place a list of recognized eco schemes. So the set aside of land, for example, is one of those, as well as organic farming. And there's a whole list that you can find listed on the EU websites. It includes also things, though, like precision agriculture, moving to agroecology types of farming, also carbon farming and agroforestry, for example. The Common Agricultural Policy's Farm Advisory Services and Farm Sustainability Data Network are to be enhanced to ensure that knowledge is transferred to farmers in order to allow them to understand and be motivated to move in the direction that is being given to them in the farm to fork strategy. Research and innovation, of course, will also play a key aspect in achieving the farm to fork goals, with $10 billion under Horizon Europe earmarked to be invested in projects related to food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, fisheries, aquaculture, and the environment. So, in terms of progress to date, what's been completed since this was announced is they managed to complete the development of an EU Code of Conduct on responsible food business and marketing practices, which is a new voluntary corporate governance model, which came into force on July 5th, 2021, voluntary. In December 2021, the Commission adopted the recommendations. Sorry, I have to sneeze. Oh, I'm so sorry, how embarrassing. The recommendations for each member state addressing what farm to fork aspects should be reflected in their national plans, which is basically the plan under which they will be requesting funds from the Common Agricultural Policy. So there are specific items that need to appear in their national plans, and that will be reviewed by the Commission, and then there's sort of a back and forth. All of the member states have now submitted their the first version of their national strategic plans, except Belgium. And Belgium, I think the delay in Belgium is that they actually have to submit two, because the Walloons and the Flemish folk can't seem to get along, so they have to submit two documents, if you will. None of these measures that you find in CAP or in the Farm to Fork or even the targets apply directly to imports. But we will continue to, of course, here in Brussels, we continue to monitor everything for any indirect linkages, and I'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward. What's ongoing? The following action items have been initiated and are at various stages of progress. So the Commission has launched and completed a study related to the regulation of new genomic techniques. So basically, this is looking at whether new genomic techniques have a potential contribution to make to achieving Green Deal targets, and the answer was yes. That was completed on March 29th, 2021, and it was also indicated in that study that the current regulatory system, which in essence would be the GMO regime, probably isn't the best thing to, if you want to encourage the development of a particular innovation. Of course, they didn't put it that way, but that was really what was going on. And so some legislative proposals are expected in late 2022. They're working on that right now. And of course, we're following that closely. The Commission has also announced future changes in the interpretation and application of some regulations in line with the Green Deal. So existing regulations to take into, for example, plans to take into account global environmental concerns in the assessment of import tolerances for pesticide residues. Of course, we're not super happy with that. Communications published by the Commission indicating the rationale and direction of upcoming proposals. So, for example, communication on the framework for certifying carbon removals to monitor and verify the authenticity of carbon removal was published on December 15th, 2021. So a communication is usually, here's our thinking on this. And at some point in the near future, we're going to come back with some proposals on how to make this happen. So we're waiting for that. Ongoing revision of existing legislation and programs. So for example, the internal analysis and stakeholder consultations that took place for the review of the Sustainable Use of Pesticides Directive. They're completed, and we're awaiting the results and recommendations to be made public on March 23rd, 2022. This one is basically, this is not about approvals and about MRLs and import tolerances. This is basically their IPM plan. So this one we actually were quite active in, and we think that this is probably the best route to go in terms of, you know, dealing with pesticides and how best to go moving forward. There are also some new legislative or implementing proposals making their way through approval systems. For example, a list of veterinary medicinal products, regulation, and medicated feed regulation. They were published in 2019, but implementing legislation is still under development. Some of you may be familiar with that one. Also, a draft proposal on deforestation-free supply chains, which was released on November 7th, 2021, and is now going through the political decision-making process. What else? Okay, so Canada basically has provided comments and input either in writing or via public consultations or in discussions with the Commission at the WTO and in the CETA committees on the new genomic techniques piece, pesticide import tolerances, the Sustainable Use Directive for Pesticides Review, the veterinary medicinal products, and the draft deforestation-free supply chain proposal to date.
Hey, Lynn, I'm just going to cut you off right there. I realize.
Am I out of time? Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I realize that the EU is obviously a very complicated topic.
No, I was almost done, so it's okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, because I know you have a hard stop for 3:30. So if there's any questions at all from the audience, the microphones are open. I see one coming up here, and please be sure to state your name and your organization to introduce yourself to our guests.
Thank you. Paul Vickers from Ontario, OFA. My question is to Ms. Iras. Is that the proper way of saying it? Yeah, okay. So my question is, you were talking about the Farm Bill, and with the high prices of commodities right now, and I would say it's probably one of the few times in a long time that we've had high prices in soybeans, corn, probably even dairy. I'm not too sure about the beef industry. There's all this money that has been used in the Farm Bill to help support those industry in low times. What happens when we get into such a high tide era that we're in right now?
I couldn't hear the last part of the question. What happens when?
When we're in an era of high prices, high commodity prices, like is that money still just get pushed out the door because it's been pushed out the door for so many years? If you want me, do the farmers still receive the compensation even though the prices, the commodity prices, are quite high?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I do know that the Biden administration has been really focused on the inflation and high food prices. They've been targeting a number of industries, market consolidation in the meat market industry, but also they're looking at retailers. I just saw an article yesterday that Vilsack said he'll be looking at retailers' profit margins, as well as the seed companies as well. So I think that they're looking at it from both ways, but I do not know what the latest is on how everybody is getting from the Farm Bill.
Thank you.
All right, next question.
Anthony O'Neill from the Canadian Ornamental Horticultural Alliance. And when we hear about the European approach to sustainability and the Green Deal, not to throw you off because it's not farm to fork so much, but just wondering if you have a few comments and some highlights that you can give us as to what the Green Deal means for the ornamental sector of horticulture, with regards to tree planting, supporting for the farms that are growing the trees, the green infrastructure within the communities, urban green covering, those types of topics. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that's the thing, that's the creating opportunities part of the whole plan, isn't it? So as long as you can meet all of the requirements in the EU, and as long as, you know, they remain open to imports and that we're competitive in that context, then yes, there's absolutely a lot of opportunities. And there's a lot of urban centers in the EU and a lot of really interesting ideas about, you know, urban farming and all sorts of things like that. So absolutely, a lot of opportunities.
Ron?
Thank you, Frank. Ron Maynard, the dairy farmer, or PI, Federation of Agriculture. Question to our European expert is, you talked about genomic change in regulations or whatever for genomic indicators, but yet I'm confused as how that will match with the EU's stand on GMOs, historic stand on GMOs, and have they changed their stand or are willing to look at doing something different? Thank you.
They're absolutely have painted themselves in a corner on GMOs. So we don't talk about GMOs. These are not GMOs. That's sort of the whole point. Their study basically argues these are not GMOs because these new techniques do not require the introduction necessarily of a foreign gene. They are simply a modification of the gene itself, which is something that would arise in nature randomly in any case. So that's kind of how they're differentiating it. But however, I will tell you that a lot of NGOs really enjoy calling these the new GMOs. So this battle is not over yet. And they have made it clear that, you know, even though the proposal is not put forward yet, it's very clear that even if they're not considered GMOs, there will be some sort of mandatory labeling aspect in this context in the EU.
Terrific. All right. Seeing no further questions, I'll call that time. Give us 2 extra minutes. Suzanne, Lynn, thank you so much for the great discussion, and thanks to our audience for the excellent questions. We're going to eagerly watch for updates moving forward and keep everyone apprised. I won't keep everyone any longer. Thanks.
Thank you very much.